This video is sponsored by Spell. Spell is a free-to-play co-op action game that features an online matchmaking system where players can compete in ranked PvP missions as well as take on and triumph against epic boss encounters. The developers are actively making changes to the game to create a full-fledged epic experience for all players, which is something I can appreciate. Check the link in the description to receive early access. What's up, you guys? I'm back again with another video, and today I'm returning to you all with a Holy Paladin guide for Battle for Azeroth. Now, if you guys do not know who I am, I'm a Mistweaver main that's been playing Mistweaver for a long time, but I also play just almost every healer under the sun depending on the expansion, and I have a decent amount of experience on a ton of different classes for PvP, and I figure it's time that I picked up the Holy Paladin because I was getting kind of tired of playing the Mistweaver just because of the mana, and running out of mana was getting very frustrating, and I did not enjoy that gameplay style, but I do enjoy dealing big damage. Now, the Holy Paladin, just like the Mistweaver, does insane damage, and arguably it actually does more damage. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because there's not that many Holy Paladin guides out there on YouTube, and because of that, I figured it was a good opportunity for me to make a video to try and answer some of the questions that I've been getting, because you guys have been asking me a lot to explain some of the things about HPAL. Now, I am by no means as good on the HPAL as I am on some of the other healers, but I have put in a good amount of time, so I figure I'll make this overall general guide for some of you guys out there explaining a few things, and then as I get better on the class, I promise you I'll update it as I get more experience. But this should be a great starter for all of you guys out there. This should be a great opportunity for you to pick up the class and have some fun if you did not get that classic beta key that you were hoping for. Now, just like all of my videos in the past, this guide will consist of several sections, and I will put timestamps in the description box below if you want to check that out and you want to skip through the video because you might not have time to watch the full video, or your attention span is like mine and you simply just can't watch a full video. So this guide will consist of our general talents, our PvP talents. I will then go into our Azerite traits and stats, and then finally I'll end the video with just kind of a basic overview of the rotation and how you can heal in PvP and excel. Now, with that being said, I want to start off by just saying this class, to me, seems pretty gear dependent at the moment. Mistweaver is pretty gear dependent, but you can get away with a lot of raw healing output. But because of the way your toolkit works as a Holy Paladin, you really do need to get that gear. So go out there and farm some of them PvEs and go out there and do some world quests and all that boring stuff that you don't want to do, so you can finally have fun and poon some noobs as an HPAL dealing big damn. So going into our general talents first, this is the basic overview on your general talents. Now, I'm going to go over the basic talents here, and I promise I'll get more in depth in my next guide, because some things like Crusader's might be good versus melee, and Bestow Faith is almost just always your general go-to. So for level 15, Bestow Faith is the go-to talent. It is a delayed heal after 5 seconds that is pretty low mana cost, and it does a nice bit of healing in terms of your overall healing. So that is a great pick for things like when you're about to go into CC, or if someone's going behind a pillar and you want to get that line of sight healing. That is a solid option. Level 30, you have Unbreakable Spirit and Cavalier. Cavalier is going to give you 2 charges on your Divine Steed that you can see like that. I have 1 charge, and if I were to spec into it, I would have a 2nd charge. This is a more of an aggressive talent if you feel like you're going to have to kite a lot, or you want to stay on top of a healer. I might do this in 2v2s if I'm confident, depending at the rating I'm playing, where I know I can probably just put in a bunch of pressure and take that healer out of the game. I'll play Cavalier to stick on top of them like Resto Druids or even Mistweaver Monks. Unbreakable Spirit is your overall go-to safe talent because it does lower the cooldown on things like Bubble and your other walls like your Divine Protection, which is a very, very solid cooldown that you can use while stunned. It's a wall, and this lowers it to a 42-second cooldown. So if you get Kidney Shot, you can use your Divine Protection and you mitigate a lot of that damage. So it's just going to lower the cooldown on your bubble and your wall, which might be good versus comps that you feel like you're going to get swapped to, but not cleaves. They're going to stick on you the entire time, so I do like that talent. Level 45, you have 3 categories. You have Fist of Justice, Repentant, and Blinding Light. Blinding Light is rarely taken. It's only good when you're playing with like a Fire Mage and maybe a Feral Druid, where you feel like you need that extra line of CC because they check off all the other boxes in terms of CC, but it's a long CD, and it's just not as effective as Repentance or Blinding Light. Repentance is good in 2v2s when you're playing with maybe like a Warlock, or you feel like you need that extra line of CC versus a Mistweaver Monk, because whenever they get out of CC, they're probably going to have a Cocoon, and this just adds an extra layer of CC to your Holy Paladin toolkit. It's a short cooldown, and it's good into classes like that because Mistweaver Monks really can't avoid Repentance if they want to heal. It's a great way to keep them behind a pillar or just mitigate or stop their healing altogether. But Fist of Justice is where the secret lies. Fist of Justice works really well because it just adds to your judgment rotation, where it's just where a lot of your big damn lies, and I'll get into that in a minute. But what it means, or what it does, is every time you use a judgment, which you'll see me use right here, it's gonna, look at 25k, it lowers the cooldown on your Hammer of Justice by 10 seconds. So you're gonna be throwing these out like crazy, trying to lower the cooldown on your Hammer of Justice so you can follow up with more setups with your melee DPS or in your 3v3 comp. And because you're throwing out judgment, you're just going to be dealing big damn, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Level 60, we have Devotion Aura. Nothing is better than Devotion Aura. In my opinion, it's the best overall talent here because it works great with your Aura Mastery, and it's just very effective in mitigating a lot of damage, so not much said there. Just always take that. Level 75, just like level 60, you're going to go with Holy Avenger. Holy Avenger is the way that you're going to work around your Avenging Wrath. You'll use your Holy Avenger to increase your haste, which will allow you to get Holy Lights, because you'll notice that if you do not get a crit on your Holy Shock, or it does not proc your Holy Light cast, your fast cast Holy Lights, you're going to be casting these really slow Holy Lights, and it's going to be very frustrating. So Holy Avenger kind of corrects that, and it increases your Holy Shock healing by 30% for 20 seconds. So it's a great way to work around waiting for your Avenging Wrath, your main healing CD. Now for level 90, this is where some controversy lies. I know Crusader, who's a really great Holy Paladin, likes to play Avenging Crusader, but all I'm going to say is that Avenging Crusader costs 10% of your mana, or 10,000 mana, and the damage output you get of Avenging Crusader, which is like known as melee wings, is not as good as it once was, because Sanctified Wrath with Avenging Wrath does pretty much or even more damage, and it costs 0 mana to use this version of your wings. You can deal range damage, you have big Holy Lights, it buffs pretty much all of your healing, and the reason why this is so effective is because it's going to allow you to get an instant, proc on your Holy Shock, an instant crit because of the changes that we recently had. If I have this with wings up, my Holy Light will be procced, so I can get a fast cast Holy Light immediately to top my target if I need to use it with like something like Divine Favor for extra healing there. That's a one-shot top heal, and then I can go into dealing huge damage at a range without having to hit the target without wasting any mana, right? I can press this, boom, Holy Shock, go for my Holy Light, and then just deal huge damage with Judgment depending on how low the target is. I'll talk about that later. My Holy Shock does huge damage. Divine Purpose allows me to get another Holy Shock off, and you can deal huge damage with the regular wings and still heal at a range and not have to worry about getting value out of your Avenging Crusader. So in my opinion, I think you should always be taking your Sanctified Wrath. It's going to increase the duration of your Avenging Wrath and reduce the Holy Shock cooldown by 50% for its duration, so you can get more Holy Shocks out for more procs on your Holy Light, and you can just deal way more damage, and I'll explain that later. So for me, Sanctified Wrath is a no-brainer. Level 100, we have Divine Purpose and Beacon of Faith. So for 2v2s, if you're fighting the average melee comp, Divine Purpose is just going to allow you to deal more burst damage and more burst healing. Beacon of Faith allows you to have an extra beacon that you can put on your bar, and you can have a beacon on 2 different targets if you want to, and you can heal both targets when you're trying to deal with split pressure, and it's very effective in those scenarios. However, if you're trying to do huge damage like me in 2v2s, and you're playing with like a DK, or you're playing with like maybe a Demon Hunter or a Windwalker, Divine Purpose is going to allow you to deal way more damage, because you can get back-to-back procs on your Holy Shock, because it has a 20% chance to trigger again. And sometimes in some scenarios, I've gotten 3 Holy Shocks back-to-back, and I can use them offensively or defensively, and I really like that because it allows me to just spam out Holy Shocks when I need them. It's RNG, but sometimes it can proc like crazy, and that's a 1 in 5 chance, so I think it's worth taking there over Beacon of Faith. Those are my general talents, and I promise you with this setup right here with Sanctified Wrath and Divine Purpose, you can deal some huge damage during your wings. Going on to our PvP talents, these PvP talents that you see here on the side are going to be your general go-tos. You're not going to rotate too much out. Divine Favor, I like a ton. Some players do not like Divine Favor, but it just gives me an opportunity to instantly top my target, or if I'm stuck and I really need to heal and I'm not getting like what I need and I need to top myself and I have a guy training me and he's not kicking at all, Divine Favor makes it so that my next Holy Light or Flash of Light is increased by 100%. It costs no mana, so it's mana efficient, and it is unable to be interrupted. However, targets can purge off this buff. If I use this buff, it is a buff that can be purged, spell stolen, and things like that. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to make sure when you activate the ability, you're looking up here at your buffs to see if it was purged or not. But it just allows you to get off these Holy Lights are going to heal for a ton. And a great way to use them sometimes is you can get that proc on your, there you go, Divine Purpose just proc there. So another free Holy Shock back to back. But it's great to use on fast cast Holy Lights if you just need a huge heal or if you just need to top somebody immediately. But that's why I like to use it. It's a short CD. It was recently buffed, so it's a 25-second cooldown. Light's Grace for me is almost always mandatory in terms of what I've seen. It's just going to increase my healing done of my Holy Light by 50%, and it reduces all damage that target receives by 5% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So if you are trying to just top somebody or you're getting trained down and you got their kick out of the way, if I get one Holy Light here, that's 50% increased healing on that Holy Light, and I have a wall for 5%, and I can go for another Holy Light if I juke their kick, 10% reduced damage, all the way up to 15% reduced damage. And if you were to activate maybe your Divine Protection, that's 15 plus 20, that's 35% reduced damage, plus you're wearing plate, so it's good in the melee. I like this talent a ton, and I don't really like taking it out unless I just don't need it at all, and it's not one of those matches where I feel that I'm going to be spamming out a ton of Holy Lights, rather than just relying on my Holy Shocks and my Blessing of Sacrifice and things like that. Blessed Hands was recently nerfed in, I think, a few patches ago, where now it just adds an extra charge onto your BOP, your Blessing of Protection. So I have 2 charges of that, and my Freedom, where I have 2 charges of Freedom. But it used to have 2 charges on your Blessing of Sacrifice, and you would play Ultimate Sacrifice, making it so that your sacrifice made the target pretty much immune to damage, and you would receive a dot that would so you would Blessing of Sacrifice them, and they would take no damage, but you would receive 100% of the damage they were being dealt in a dot form. Now that you don't have 2 stacks of this or 2 charges of this on Blessed Hands, you're not always going to take Ultimate Sacrifice. So if you feel like your double BOP, double Freedom isn't very necessary, if the team has a ton of purges and there's no melee, if you're fighting like a Warlock and you're fighting like maybe a Shadow Priest, or you're fighting maybe a Mage, double BOP's not going to do too much for you there, right? The double Freedom might be nice, but it's probably not worth taking. You might need Ultimate Sacrifice to, keep that person alive. So in those scenarios, I might swap that out for Ultimate Sacrifice versus double casters or a caster per se, where I need something more than Blessing of Protection, and I need something that's going to save them in those heavy burst moments like Combustion, for example, or Dark Soul, and I need to save my target. I can use my Bubble, and I can use my Sacrifice on the target, and that person, I can't sack this guy for some reason because he's not out of range. I don't know what the hell that means, but I could use Bubble Sack, or I could just sack him and then maybe use my wall, and that guy would be fine if he got stuck out there and he's about to eat 2 giant Chaos Bolts. So for me, I traditionally rotate out things like Blessed Hands and Ultimate Sack versus comps like Rogue Mage, for example. I might not play double BOP. I might, just depending on what the rating is at, but you could play things like, double BOP, or you can play Ultimate Sack versus Rogue Mage mirrors, like a Rogue Mage, Priest, or Rogue Mage Druid. You could also take out Divine Favor, because the Mage is definitely going to be out there trying to spell your Divine Favor and lock you out and kind of screw you over. So you could play a rotation like this, because you can still bop off Vendettas. That's really nice when fighting against an Assassination Rogue. So generally, it's up to what you like in your personal playstyle, but in 2v2s, I almost always take these talents because I'm trying to play super aggressive and deal tons of damage. So I like to have double Freedom so I can connect to my target. I like playing Cavalier so I can have 2 charges on my steed with Freedom, and I can chase after the enemy healer or the target and just deal huge damage. So hopefully that kind of explains things. Once again, Savix needs to stop messaging me. Also, let me quickly talk about Cleanse the Weak and Divine Vision. When fighting against a Shadow Priest, you definitely want to take at least a Divine Vision. You can swap that out for your Blessed Hands when fighting against the Shadow Priest, because Bop's not going to do too much for you there. But Divine Vision is going to make it so that you at least have a 15% Shadow Aura, and it's going to increase the aura of your Devotion Aura, the range of your Devotion Aura, so they'll be taking less damage. But it gives you 15% reduction against shadow damage with overtime effects and, you know, area of effects. That's not very, you know, very important, but at least their dots are going to be dealing 15% less damage. This is going to be great into Shadow Priest, but outside of that, you're never really going to take that. Some people like Cleanse the Weak versus Rogues. I think that's garbanzo beans. I don't think you're ever really going to use that because they just reapply their poisons anyway, and it's only on your Holy Lights. You can combo, however, though, if you're fighting against a Shadow Priest and Divine Favor doesn't seem very useful to you, you can do Cleanse the Weak and Divine Vision, making it so that you have a 15% reduction on Shadow Priest abilities in terms of their dot damage, and Cleanse the Weak makes it so that when people are within your aura and you dispel them of an effect, everyone in your aura is dispelled of a similar effect. So for example, if this guy has Vampiric Touch on him and I have Vampiric Touch on myself, if I dispel myself, this little crab here, this little scuttler here would also be dispelled of all the effects that I dispelled myself of. All right, so now that we covered our talents here, why does Holy Paladin deal so much damage? Now there are 3 traits you're going to want to go for. The number 1 trait for dealing that huge amounts of damage is having at least 3, well, you can only have 3, but going for 3, Indomitable Justice. Your judgment deals additional damage when your health percentage exceeds the target up to 5,750. Forget the number. The more health you have than the target, if you're higher HP than the target that you're hitting the judgment with, you're going to be dealing a huge judgment. Now, I had a video, and I'll show some clips here, where I was hitting like 35k judgments. I'm hitting 40k judgments now, and that's going to be like an execute and damage that they don't expect. It's going to go through bops. It's a super effective way of dealing damage. It goes through things like Fist of Fury. It goes through a ton of different pairing effects, and you can whip out those judgments and just one-shot people when they're not expecting it. So having 3 of these is going to be very good, especially when you're playing things like Fist of Justice, right? Fist of Justice is going to, you know, lower the cooldown of your Hammer of Justice. So you can just throw out these judgments and whap people to lower the cooldown of your Hajj, and you're going to be dealing huge damage with that. Now, you have to remember, you have to be higher HP than the target you're hitting. So if you're low HP, these judgments aren't going to be huge. But if you're somebody that's able to maintain a high HP health pool and be above the opponent, especially if you're hitting a healer or someone that's getting bursted down, and you want to add the execute, this will execute people. I mean, it hits harder than a Rep Paladin judgment. So you can throw out these judgments and bang them, and that's what allows me to do huge numbers, especially when the target's falling low on HP. Glimmer of Light is another really effective trait. Your Holy Shock leaves a glimmer on that target for 30 seconds. When I Holy Shock anything else, whether it be damage or healing, it's going to it's going to heal or damage that target. So for example, if I Holy Shock this guy, for example, he has Glimmer of Light on him. Now, if I were to damage somebody or heal somebody, obviously he's my ally, he's not going to take any damage. If I were to hit this target, you'll see that it still heals him. So this is a very effective way of putting this dot out and stopping drinks or adding additional bursts. So for example, if this dummy right here wants to go behind a pillar and drink, and he goes to drink, I can Holy Shock him and deal damage and interrupt that drink. I can also just double Holy Shock back to back with the guy that has the dot on it and deal additional burst damage on my Holy Shock. So it's a great way to deal additional healing. Obviously, if this target has Glimmer of Light and I put it on him, and then I go to it proc there, my Divine Purpose, so I can do another Holy Shock for free, it's going to do an extra heal on him as well, right? So you're spreading out this extra healing, and you're also spreading out extra damage. It's good for burst and for healing. Some players also like Radiant Incandescence, which is just going to make it so that your Holy Shock critical deals an additional damage or an additional healing over 3 seconds. So it's pretty similar to Glimmer of Light. I think Glimmer of Light is a little bit more useful in certain scenarios, whereas Radiant Incandescence is going to give you just probably a little bit better value in terms of like how much healing or damage you're going to be dealing. But I still think that this gives you more of like a wide variety of uses rather than just dealing additional damage to that person or additional healing to that person. You want to make sure that you get 3 Indomitable Justice, 3 Glimmer of Light, or you can get 3 Radiant Incandescence, whatever you want, however you want to sort it out. But getting 3 of these, and you can get this combo actually from just doing PvP. If you just go out and do PvP, you can get a full set of this, of Indomitable Justice and Glimmer of Light, for just doing Arena and getting your caps. So it's very effective there. And that's how I deal big damage, right? I do double Holy Shocks back to back with Glimmer of Light. I throw out a Judgment on my wings. You know, I can be dealing even more damage because it's going to buff all my damage. And even your Crusader Strikes hit pretty solid. So you can throw things like this out. That's a huge judge, and that's a huge holy shock. Into a judge, into a holy shock, into Crusader Strike. And if I need to heal anybody, I can just holy shock the guy one time and, you know, heal myself, or go for a fast cast holy light back into doing damage again for 33k there. I mean, you can deal insane damage as an H-Pal, and I think during your wings, it's probably a little bit more bursty, actually, than a Mistweaver. But it's just kind of depending on where you're at in your HP pool and where they're at, and it's just, you know, a little bit more situational. But it's very effective for dealing damage and very effective for healing. Now, in order to be kind of effective at the Holy Paladin, you need to have Critical Strike and you need to have Haste. Haste is going to be just like your secondary stat that you want to have just to make your life a little bit easier, but Critical Strike is pretty necessary because of Infusion of Light. Your Holy Shot criticals reduce the cast time of your next Holy Light by 1.5 seconds and increase the healing of your next Flash of Light by 40%. So everything is crit based, right? You want to crit, so you want to have more crit strike because it's going to increase the effectiveness of those attacks and heals, and you want to crit as much as possible, because if you don't get any crits, your heals aren't going to be very effective, and your Holy Lights are going to cast like so slow. It's awful just hard casting Holy Lights unless you have the kick out of the way and you're already in a lead and you're just stacking that Light's Grace to reduce the amount of damage that you or that target takes. So Crit Strike and Haste is your go-to stats because of Infusion of Light and how your class works in terms of dealing damage and healing. All right, now I want to quickly go over just some of your defensive abilities. So you have things like Bestow Faith. Make sure you're using this almost on CD, especially if your target's going behind the pillar. If you're not pressing Bestow Faith, you're losing out on a lot of healing. You know, based on my gameplay, sometimes it's like 8 to 10 to even sometimes 12% of my healing, and it doesn't cost that much mana at all. It's 1.2% of your overall mana for a good amount of healing. Outside of that, you're just relying on Holy Shocks to kind of proc your Holy Lights. If you don't proc anything, that's fine. You can go to dealing damage and hoping that Holy Shock healed for enough. You can cast a Holy Light. You have things like Light of the Dawn that might proc with Divine Purpose like I just did right there. So I can go for another one on my Light of the Dawn. And then you can see here that I have a Holy Light. So I can go for a Holy Light into a Holy Shock, into a fast cast Holy Light, into maybe Bestow Faith. You know, I can rotate my CDs hoping that something procs. Now, if you're stuck in a scenario where nothing procs, then you have two options, right? You have maybe a defensive CD like Blessing of Sacrifice. You can use Blessing of Protection, or you can use things like Light of the Dawn, where you deal damage to yourself, but you heal that target. And that heal isn't the most effective heal in the game, and it looks huge here because I'm hitting this low-level target. But you can use this to try and stall to your next Holy Shock, so you can go for a Holy Light, Bestow Faith, and then you can even combo your long cast time after the global's over into a double heal, right? If I go for a Holy Light, the GCD's off this, so I can kind of do back-to-back heals, right? Holy Light into Light of the Martyr if I need extra healing. Then you have your other defensive CDs like Blessing of Sacrifice, depending if you're playing your Ultimate Sacrifice or just regular Blessing of Sacrifice. Regular Blessing of Sacrifice is still a 30% damage reduction, and you have things like Aura Mastery, which extends your Devotion Aura, and it makes it also 20% increased effectiveness. So, for example, right now, everyone in my aura is taking 10% less damage. If I use my my Aura Mastery, it's going to increase the effectiveness, and now everyone in my aura takes 20% less damage reduction. So I can even use my things like I can use Blessing of Sacrifice and Aura Mastery, and that can stack for 50% damage reduction, and I can use my wall for myself, my Divine Protection. So I have a lot of damage, solid damage reduction across my whole group or for a specific target. And if shit hits the fan, I can also use my Blessing of Protections, things like that. So you want to kind of weave things out. And then when you get your wings, nobody's going to die, right? When you use your Avenging Wrath, no one's going to die. You're getting so many, crits on your Holy Shocks. Your Holy Lights are going to heal for an absolute ton. You're never going to, no one's ever going to die when you have your wings up. But when your wings fall off, then it kind of gets scary. But you can rely on that same rotation that I just told you. And then you also have your damage reduction like I talked about. And then you have Holy Avenger, which is going to give you extra haste, and your Holy Shocks are going to heal for more because of that. So you can see here that it's not that bad to spam Holy Lights with Holy Avenger. So don't forget about this ability. Don't stack Holy Avenger and your Avenging Wrath, because that's a huge waste. You don't need both. But when you rotate and weave these abilities out, like Blessing of Sac, Bestow Faith, going for Holy Shocks, Light of the Martyr when you're scared, when you weave these things out, you heal extremely well, and your mana does not go down if that target has beacon on them. So keep all this in mind. Making sure you're swapping your beacons is very important, right? If you have your beacon on yourself, you know, you're gonna be spending a little bit less mana there, so that's really good. And then you can swap back the beacon to the target that's taking pressure. So your beacon's gonna be swapping around depending on who's taking a brunt of the damage. If you kind of need to swap, you know, AoE spread heal, and both of you guys are low, a nice little trick that you can do is maybe look for, you know, a proc on this, and maybe it's your wings as well. You can put the beacon on yourself, and then you can press Divine Favor for a huge Holy Light, heal this guy, and then both of us receive a large amount of healing, and that will help stabilize your group. So using things like your beacon, swapping it on one target, healing yourself to kind of do some spread healing, using Divine Favor to increase that amount of healing on that moment, during that moment where you need to really stabilize your whole group, that's very good. But just, yeah, that rotation seems a little goofy at first, but making sure you're using your Bestow Faith and just kind of weaving things in out, using your Holy Avenger to kind of stall things out, and then using your Avenging Wrath to really just bring back the pressure in terms of damage, right? In terms of damage, huge Holy Shocks here, you know, huge Holy Shocks into Judgments. Oh, this guy's falling low. Really quickly top him with a ridiculous heal. Go back on this guy, you know, throw your Maledict out, Crusader Strike, Holy Shock, Judgment. You can do a huge burst as an HPAL and huge burst healing, and you almost never go and that's why it's one of my favorite healers this expansion. But that's gonna do it for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to let me know in the comment section below. I know that was a lot of info, but I tried to talk about it very fast. I'll do a more in-depth guide as I get more experience on this class, which I will. If you guys have any more questions, again, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to check me out live on my live stream and, you know, play with me sometime or ask me some questions, the info will be here somewhere on the screen. And please, please, please do not forget to hit that sub button. I heard that 70% of the people that watch my videos aren't even subbed. So be sure to smash that sub button, and I'll see you guys next time.